Now, Tom, there are lots of important things going on. We're going to talk about Donald Trump and the Gaza ceasefire. Going to talk about assisted dying, there is an awful lot of important stuff. But fundamentally, I can't expect a government to do anything sensible when there's a prime minister who's appointing people who have utterly lunatic, insane views. That it'd be quite funny if your 5-year-old mentioned them at tea time. And you'd have a laugh about it, and you'd bring it up at your speech at her wedding. I remember the time when Ashley thought you could be a llama if you wanted. Ha ha ha! A toast to Ashley the llama. Wouldn't that be funny? She's a government minister. Mm-hmm. This is actually not just silly, this is terrifying.
You sound almost surprised though, Julia. I mean,
I know, why?
In fairness to Keir Starmer, I think given the nature of the Labour Party these days, it'd be quite difficult for him to find someone who didn't, when pressed, would say that you could identify it as a llama. They are lost to this stuff. Incidentally, by the by, if you are into your gender ideology, I mean, not that I want to give these people tips, don't fall at the llama hurdle. Like, just say, don't be ridiculous. But the fact that people still feel the need to say, of course, you can identify as a bat or a
And we do have kids in
animal.
school, in some of the maddest schools. By the way, get your kids out of those schools, people.
Yeah.
Seriously, get your kid out of these schools.
Not a good idea.
There's always a choice somewhere where kids are allowed to identify as cats and they get a litter tray. And people think this stuff is made up. No, it's actually happening. Everyone needs to be given, frankly, a slap. Everyone needs a slap over this. I'm sorry, shut up. You're talking. People don't do that enough anymore. Everyone's like, oh, be kind. Although the be kind people are always the one who are sending rape threats to women who stand up on this. I was debating with a well-known columnist of the Mail on Sunday, Dan Hodges, online yesterday about this, saying, I don't know why people can't just be polite and kind. If someone wants to call themselves she or her, I don't know what the big deal is. Well, we were polite for about 10 years. Women were polite, and then they threatened to rape and kill and punch us in the face because we went, yeah, but we don't mind the she-her thing, but you can't actually get into our changing rooms and our toilets and refuges and be put in with women in prison cells. And then you start attacking us. So, time for politeness is over. You're all insane. You're absolutely stark, staring insane. It's a load of nonsense. We're not playing along anymore. We are done with this madness. And a man saying he is a woman, as opposed to a man saying, I feel very feminine, I want to wear a dress, I want to be called you. Fine, I don't care. Live your best life. I don't care. But don't tell me you're a woman and make me pretend to believe it under pain of losing my job, being imprisoned, going off for social media. It's not that much to ask.
Absolutely. And politeness is not what is being demanded here. People are generally polite, of people of all different... Yeah. People could have a...
I used to use people's preferred pronouns out of politeness until I realised the implications.
This is a movement which is unique among any other that we've seen in recent years because of the fact that it doesn't want tolerance
for its own...
Absolutely. Yeah. Or just live and let live. It demands you to... believe in it. It demands you to reshape the world.
And also, it's not the same as gay people want. We want the same rights as straight people. Quite rightly, I fought for gay marriage and things like that. But it's trans people, trans-identified. It's actually activists, but largely, not a lot of people who identify as trans, demanding women's rights. They're demanding someone else's rights.
And the end of women's spaces, the end of women's rights. It's trying to shred a lot of things which were very hard-won and very, very important. Yeah. That's what people are upset about. When people have, some people, Dan Hodges, others who maybe have kind of paid attention to this debate for the last 5 minutes, perhaps you can forgive them this reading of it. But at the same time, we have been talking about this for a very long time. The number of people who've had their names dragged through the mud just for saying things like there are two biological sexes.
People who've lost their jobs and their livelihoods.
There's also a lot of people who've been young people, confused people who have, had life-altering procedures done to them because of this ideology, because they were pushed down a particular pathway. So the time for just saying, "Oh, why aren't you being more polite?" I mean, it is almost insulting at this point.
Yeah,
to that kind of
sod off, and I'm being polite at that point. I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this because this is one of my bugbears, but I'm done with this. I'm absolutely done with this. And I do not trust this government. The last lot were useless on this as well. It all happened under their watch, but I am done with this. 03444 499 1000 for your thoughts, please. Let's get back to a lot of the big battles going on front page of the papers today about Kemi Badenoch as a Tory leader, basically saying deal with Nigel Farage and reform ahead of the next election is for the birds, even for the local elections coming up in May. There's a WhatsApp war. Now, we were told there's going to be a good WhatsApp story involving the Tories. It's not a good story, frankly. It's. Let's be honest. With all due respect to the journalists involved, it is not. It is not like what we found out from that Labour WhatsApp group, where outrageous things being said. Although I did note you wrote a fantastic piece to The Spectator, which I completely agree with, which is like don't think anyone should be losing their job over WhatsApps they write. And we were saying this with Sam Armstrong on the show yesterday. Could we be allowed to have private conversations? His misjudgment in sharing it with the whole number of people. I think that's where hypocrisy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as a general rule, I think people should be allowed to have private conversations and say whatever they want.
And I think we should all support that position out of self-preservation, if anything else. There's a lot of people who see one of these scandals of someone saying something offensive or a bit outrageous in private, and everyone has to pretend like they would never do anything like that. They might not have said the particular things that this guy said. He went quite far. Let's be frank about it. But at the same time, let's recognise that sometimes people say things in private they wouldn't say in public, and it's not because they secretly believe the private thing. They've just got a weird sense of
and some
humour.
of them are jokes. And I have to say, Sam and I agreed yesterday, actually, some of the WhatsApps were quite funny.
Yeah.
I mean, they actually were. But I think, think back, in the service industry, which is effectively what MPs are. I mean, I think about what we used to say about some of the customers. Think about what I used to do to some of my customers' food and drinks. But there we are. Don't be rude to the waitress. Top tip in life for you guys. Anyway, but do you think there's any chance there is going to be any deal? I mean, it's all very well they can say there's not going to be a deal, but at the end of the day, we are looking at a situation where we are stuck with this god-awful, useless, abjectly wrong on everything other than planning for housing. That's it, Labour government. They're going to win another big majority next time round on the current figures. I know weeks-long time of politics, 4 years is even longer, but currently, if the right are split, they can cancel each other out and let Labour get back in again. Is it worth a pact, even if people didn't get everything they wanted?
Well, it just seems like neither side have any incentive or interest right now from their own preservation of their own political fortunes to enter into that kind of deal. If your main objective is to keep Keir Starmer out of government, what you're saying is absolutely true. It's the only way that's going to take place. But at the same time, Farage wants to replace the Conservative Party, and that's a big part of his argument, is that this party has had its days. We're not just keeping it honest, we want to replace it and get rid of it. And she would be essentially agreeing to the dissolution of the Conservative Party as we know it.
And there would be a lot of Tories who would leave. They go to the Lib Demi side, although a lot of them were already
they should have
gone.
Probably been to begin with. But
it was the Conservative Party that changed, not Conservative voters.
And it's one of those things where I think a lot rides on if reforms numbers continue to tick up. There's been a big debate as to whether that 25% roughly that they're hitting at the moment is a ceiling, or whether they can actually break through. Because the closer they get to 30%, the more of a firm argument they have to say of, well, no, let's just keep going.
But there is also in the first past the post system, there is, depending on how your votes are distributed, there is a point, there's sort of a tipping point where you go from having, there's a point you go from having 5 seats to 70 seats. To 200 seats, and it can be just a couple of percentage points, just tip over the edge. It's going to be absolutely fascinating to watch that. Immigration and deportation is very much in the news this week. Talked a lot about it on the show yesterday, so I won't talk too long in this section. But the latest story about a failure to deport. I mean, Nigel Farage blasted the Home Office boast of, we moved 19,000 immigrants, pointing out, way more than that have arrived. There are, hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants in London alone. Many, people who've arrived illegally, many who've just overstayed visas. No one. It's interesting how much the public's reaction to you've deported 600 a month. People weren't going, that's really good. That's like dropping the ocean. So, 600 a day arrive sometimes, for goodness sake. And that's just on the boats, the ones we know about, as opposed to people overstaying visas. But the latest story about a Pakistani paedophile, can't be named, got to protect him and his family, obvs. He's escaped deportation, although again, it was all appealed and everything. But yet again, another one of these immigration courts. Basically, he's the father of 2 toddlers. He was convicted of trying to get 3 young girls to engage in sex and was basically a predatory paedophile. Call him what he is. He was jailed for 18 months. Question marks about being only jailed for 18 months. Let's go through all the lists here. But when he came out, basically they were trying to deport him, as you want to deport him, but no, apparently the court ruled that it would be unduly harsh for the children to be without their father. Now, he's not allowed to live with them, and he can only have supervised contact with them. Not my problem, I'm afraid. Not my problem if he's unduly harsh. I think what's unduly harsh in kids is to grow up to know that your dad's a paedophile. Is it just me? I don't know. But I mean, the fact that people like that sort of crime could be committed. Apparently the wife felt that she was partly to blame because, having had COVID, she wasn't able to have sex with her husband. So that would absolutely justify him trying to track down young girls on the internet to have sex with them. I mean, are you kidding me?
I just don't know how anyone cannot support the position that we need to look at our human rights framework, that we need to pull out of the ECHR if necessary, because people have this debate on this kind of lofty plane which is completely detached from reality. They'll start waxing lyrical about the end of the Second World War and Winston Churchill. Do we really think that when this convention was drew up, what they had in mind was the hard-won rights of paedophiles, acid attackers, people who flash women in public or come into the country illegally so they can operate in an Albanian crime gang? Is that really who we were thinking of when we thought that we need to give shelter to the huddled masses of the world if they find themselves in conflict or difficulty? Of course not. No one deep down actually supports that, and yet this is allowed to carry on just because it would look wrong to do otherwise. Yeah. It's better to look good than to do good in this situation.
It's the fact that they think it looks good. That's the really scary bit. What do you make? I mean, looking overseas. What do you make of the Israel-Gaza situation? Donald Trump, once again, late last night, our time, he's made some punchy remarks. This after Hamas basically said, we're not going to release hostages on Saturday as promised. We believe that Israel has breached the terms of the ceasefire deal. I mean, Hamas has breached it numerous times already. It's interesting that they're claiming the delay in letting people return to northern Gaza. Well, that was a couple of weeks ago. That was all resolved. Not enough aid going in. Loads of aid is going in. Also, I've seen enough footage now from Gaza. Yeah, people ain't looking too starving to me. Certainly the Hamas soldiers looking fighting fit, holding their weapons up in their camouflage, aren't they? But he basically, Hamas said they've postponed the hostage releases. They're desperately trying to get those. This is the second phase of talks being back on track. But we're still looking at a couple of dozen of hostages still due to be released. Donald Trump has said basically if it was up to him, he'd scrap the deal over the hostage delay if they don't release all the hostages, not 3, all the hostages on Saturday by midday. All hell will break loose. But he says, but it's up to Israel. How significant is that, do you think?
I think it's very significant. I mean, this was being predicted from pretty early on, that whilst the first phase of the ceasefire deal was probably odds on to happen more or less, that it was going to break down sooner or later. We certainly weren't going to get to that second phase. I think people maybe didn't expect it to break down this quickly, but you are dealing with Hamas, an organisation who, to put it lightly, are not honest brokers in any kind of negotiation.
Again, I'm always amazed that people are surprised that a terrorist organisation that rape and massacre and starve people in tunnels for 16 months aren't trustworthy, because I would absolutely think those are the people I would trust. I would trust their word as their honour. Absolutely. It's been a shocker for all involved, but a learning experience, I'm sure. Yep. And also a lot of questions about is this a stalling technique? Because this is one thing about the horrendous situation of the hostages, is that at various points Hamas have either not known who is still alive and where they are, or they do know and they're not letting on for particular reasons. You saw that with the Bibas family. This is an element to this story which is going to sort of tumble out as these hostages are released, and maybe that's part of the equation here as well. Genuinely, one of my thoughts is that actually they don't actually have. You saw the state of the last 3 men to come out looking like Belson victims. Frankly, I'm kind of at the point where I'm thinking I don't think there are many hostages still alive. We know that at least there's one who celebrated his 24th birthday yesterday. We know because the other captors had been with him, but they know the family now know the terrible conditions he's held in. There's an urgency in getting who is still alive out. I wonder actually how many people are still alive, given they were given quite deliberately starvation rations, just enough to keep them alive. How many people would have succumbed? Lots of people who had injuries. Certainly got to have big question marks about whether or not those two, the baby and the toddler, now would be both toddlers, are alive. I wonder if Hamas are delaying because they've realised, we might have messed up here because we've exposed to the world just what we really like. Because they did enjoy those headlines when everyone said, look at those girls who've been released. But they look, one of them's quite plump. They've obviously been well looked after while they've been held in tunnels by Hamas for 16 months. I mean, we are in a scary, mixed up, crazy world. I wonder an awful lot of the people who say they wouldn't fight for our country and would defend people who fight for, being a llama, all the crazy, mad people. There'll be also the crazy, mad people who think that, Hamas are justified in what they're doing and are going on marches for them. But there we are. 10:21 is the time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything and everything we're talking about, but particularly llamas. And people in their 20s wouldn't fight for their country. But just the general utter madness of where we are.